welcome back to Homegrown. I'm going to be doing a demonstration on how to make bottled chili. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have 4 cups of dried pinto beans and black beans. You can do a mix or you can do all pinto beans. So start with the 4 cups. I'm going to add a half a cup of sugar in there, and then I'm just going to cover it all with water and soak it overnight. Okay, so I have my beans that have been soaking overnight. This morning I did add just a little bit more water to it. So if you're not gonna get to it right first thing in the morning, just add more water so they can continue to soak. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and drain and rinse these beans. Give them a nice rinse. Drain those out. And then we're going to go ahead and start boiling these in tomato juice. So you want 7 cups of tomato juice for your beans. And we're going to go ahead and get that boiling, and then we can start adding the rest of our ingredients. All right, so I've got a stock pot here where I'm going to pour in these beans. Okay, and then I'm going to pour in 7 cups of tomato juice. So that was 4 cups. So I'm going to add another 3. Okay, so there's 7. And then we're going to add a little bit of extra water just to cover it so that we can have enough juice to start boiling. Okay, so that should be good to get us started with the boiling process. We'll set it on high and get a good spin and stir it up. Just going to let this start boiling and keep a watch on it. In the meantime, I'm going to start the meat and the onions. All right, so in my frying pan here, I've got 2 pounds of hamburger and 1 pound of sausage. Just regular sausage, you don't want it real spicy. So just get that ready to start browning. I'm going to add 2 onions to it and brown that all together. So I'm going to go ahead and just chop up my onions and add it right in there and then start browning my meat. I am just going to go ahead and start browning this meat and the onions over here on the stove. So I'm just going to keep stirring until it's all cooked, and then I'm going to add it into the pot with my beans. While I'm over here, I'm going to go ahead and stir my beans a few times just to make sure they're not sticking to the bottom, because sometimes those beans can stick when they're in the juice. So you want to kind of stir that constantly. So while you're here at the stove, you can kind of stir both pans. Once your beans and juice has come to a boil, you're going to want to turn your heat down to about medium low, depending on your stove top. So it's more of a simmer. Okay, you're going to just let that kind of slightly boil to simmer. And then we're going to get ready to add our meat that's all browned. Okay, so you're just going to kind of chop up any big pieces. You want it pretty little in there. And let it brown. Once it's browned like this, so you shouldn't see any red in your meat, we're going to go ahead and pour this into our pan with the beans. Okay, so I'm going to pour this in. If you're worried about that fat, you could drain your meat. If you want it, I'm just going to add mine all in. Try to fatten the kids up. All right, so pour that in there. And And then we're gonna go ahead and add all the other ingredients. Okay, and then we will go ahead and cook it on the stove for about an hour before we bottle it. Okay, so we have all of our ingredients nice and ready in there. And now we are going to add another quart of juice, so another quart of tomato juice, which is 4 more cups go in there. I may need a bigger pot. Okay, and then we add a small can of chili powder, which is 0.9 ounces. Okay, so 1 ounce or 0.9 ounces, anywhere in that range of chili powder, one of these smaller cans. Okay, so you're gonna add the whole can in here. Okay. And then I'm gonna stir that up really good before adding the next ingredient, which is paprika. And once again, you're gonna add the same size a can of paprika. I couldn't find one, so mine's about half full. I could measure it into this can. So pretty close to 1 small can. So once again, 1 ounce or 0.9 ounce can of paprika. Okay, so we've got that in there. We're gonna go ahead and stir that up. And it's fine if you're doing this right on your stove. So it's cooking as you're stirring it in, that's great. Okay, so I'm gonna add a teaspoon of cumin. Okay, this kind of gives it a little kick, so if you're a little sensitive, maybe start with a half. See how you do. All right, so 1 teaspoon of cumin went in there. And then the last thing you're gonna add, aside from maybe some more tomato juice or maybe water as needed, is 24 ounces of ketchup. Okay, so this is this whole bottle here of ketchup. 24 ounces of ketchup, which I know seems really weird, but it ends up being delicious. I think it kind of helps it thicken it, gives it that really thick texture. So we're gonna stir this up, and then we're gonna kind of let it cook on the stove for about an hour. So once again, you wanna keep it about simmer. Okay, it doesn't have to boil on high the whole time, just needs to stay at a real hot temperature. All right, so stir up the ketchup, and then we're gonna take it back over to the stove to cook it for about an hour before we put it in jars. Okay, so while your chili is over here on the stove cooking, you're gonna wanna make sure that you stir it every couple of minutes just to make sure that your beans and your meat aren't sticking to the bottom. If they stick, it will burn your pan and it will ruin your whole batch of chili. So just make sure that you're kind of babysitting your pot and making sure that everything isn't sticking. Okay, so once you've got that stirred, while we wait for this to cook for an hour, we're gonna go ahead and get our lids. So brand new lids. Just put them in a little saucepan like this and fill it with water, and you can just set it to the side. Eventually we're gonna boil those in the canning process. All right, so then we're gonna go ahead and just start scrubbing your bottles and make sure you've got them all nice and clean, and then just set those aside on a clean dish towel until you're ready to bottle your chili. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get our pressure canner ready for the bottles. To do that, we're gonna fill this 3 times. So we need 3 quarts of hot water in here, and then 2 tablespoons of vinegar. And then we'll just get that boiling on the stove. Okay, so at this point in time, after our chili is cooked for about an hour, I'm gonna start filling clean jars. Now, if you don't want to bottle, you can just leave this on the stove for another maybe couple of hours and just let it cook until your beans are soft and ready to eat. if you want to bottle it, now is the time. So I'm going to go ahead and fill quart bottles. This makes about 8 quarts. I usually make this in pints, so it would make 16 pints, but apparently there's an aluminum shortage, blah, blah, blah. I can't find them at the store. So I had quarts on hand, so we're gonna just use those. So we're just gonna go ahead and start filling these. In the meantime, I've got my pressure cooker full of the 3 quarts of water and 2 tablespoons of vinegar in here getting ready. And over here I have those the lids that we put in this pot on the stove, and they're starting to boil. So in that background, that's what we got going on. And here we're gonna make sure this is stirred up each time so that you get plenty of the juice, okay? If you want, you can add a little more water if yours turned out to be thick, because this will thicken up in the jars a little bit. You can also just do it as is and add water to it when you eat it. So either way, whatever you want to do. You can also taste it and salt and pepper it to your taste. If it needs a little extra stuff, you can add it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start filling up my jars. And then I have a clean washcloth here that we're gonna wipe the tops down with once we get our jars full. So we're gonna go ahead, fill it, leaving about 1 inch of head space. Okay, and then you're gonna wipe this top down really good with your clean rag. Clean your jars, any spills. Go ahead and make sure there's nothing on the lid. That's the most important part. Otherwise your jars won't seal properly. Okay, so make sure that's all cleaned. And we're gonna set that aside, and when my lids are oiled, we'll stick the lids all on. I'm gonna go ahead and just continue filling jars until we have them all full. And then we will put the lids on and start processing these. All right, so our lids are boiled, so you're gonna get a fork and just scoop those lids out and stick them on your clean bottle, on jar. And then you're just gonna tighten that down. You don't need to really clamp it, but you want it secure. All right, and you're gonna do the same for all of them. I only did 7 because that's all that fits in a regular pressure cooker. Okay, so I'm just gonna cook the other quart and we'll eat it later. I'll just keep cooking it today and eat it later. So it makes about 8 quarts or 16 pints. There are lots of different ways you can pressure cook this, but what we're gonna do is put them in the pressure cooker that I have. The water's boiling in there. We'll get the lid all secured on there, and then we'll pressurize these for 75 minutes at 11 pounds of pressure for 75 minutes for quarts, and only probably about 60 minutes for pints. So we will go ahead and get those started. You're gonna have to wait until your pressure gets all the way to 11 pounds before you start the time. Okay, so you have to get it pressurized before you start your 75-minute timer. All right, so we're just gonna set these quarts right in the pressure cooker on the little, I don't know what that is, the little grate that goes in the bottom. So then your quarts will just set right nicely right on top. You don't want to set it right in on the bottom of the pan. You definitely want to make sure you have the grate. Your pressure cooker should come with that. Okay, so I've got my 7 quarts in here. I'm going to go ahead and put this lid up. So I'm going to line my arrows. Here's an arrow on my pan. You're going to line your arrows up and lock your lid. And when pressure, when steam starts to come out of here at a pretty level, steady rate, I can put my weight on. When I put my weight on, this little thing will pop up and then my pressure will start to rise. So I'm gonna give it a few minutes till this is coming out pretty steady, and then I'll stick the weight on and start the pressurizing. Okay, so my pressure is starting to rise here. You can see that I've got my weight on and the top has popped back there. Once that top pops, you're gonna start to see your pressure rising. When we get at 11 pounds, we're gonna go ahead and start our timer for 75 minutes. Okay, so our pressure has now reached 11 pounds. We're gonna go ahead and start a timer for 75 minutes. And then we gotta babysit our stove to make sure that our pressure stays right there at 11. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn mine down just a little to like medium high maybe. And then I can adjust it as needed, all right? All right, so our timer is just about up, and we're gonna go ahead and turn the stove off, and then we're gonna take this pan off the heat and let it depressurize. So we're just gonna set it here, and then we're just gonna wait until the pressure is at 0. All right, once your pressure is back to 0, you can go ahead and remove your weight here. It's gonna release some pressure, and we're gonna wait for this to drop. Once this drops down, it'll unlock the lid, and then we can take the lid off. All right, the top has dropped now, and so I can go ahead and gently take this off, okay? This is full pot steam, so be careful because sometimes it'll burn your arms. So I might get my hot pads, okay? We're gonna take that off, put that over the side, and then we can lift these jars out. I like to use this little jar lifter. Gonna pull those out and just set them on a towel. At this point in time, you're just gonna let them seal. You're gonna start hearing your lids pop, and that means that they're sealing, okay? Before you store these, make sure that you check each lid after they've cooled down to make sure that they have a seal. If you hear a little poppy or it clicks up, they didn't get sealed, and you'll just want to put that in the fridge and eat it immediately or in the next couple of days. All right, so this is how you make homemade chili in bottles. Hope you enjoy and join us next time.